book in her hand, a spark in her eye. Mountains couldn't silence her, she reached for the sky. In the shadow of fear, she planted her dream, where the rivers of courage endlessly stream. They tried to break her, they couldn't see. Her voice was louder than the cruelty. I am Malala, I stand tall. You can't erase me, I've heard it all. Bullets may wound, but they can't kill the flame. I am Malala, remember my name. She spoke to the world, her words were her sword. Each syllable echoed, a powerful chord. Through the valleys of doubt, she carried the light for the millions of girls robbed of their right. They tried to silence, they tried to fight, but truth's a river, it finds its light. I am Malala, I stand tall. You can't erase me, I've heard it all. Bullets may wound, but they can't kill the flame. I am Malala, remember my name. Each syllable echoed, a powerful chord. Through the valleys of doubt, she carried the light for the millions of girls robbed of their right. They tried to silence, they tried to fight, but truth's a river, it finds its light, its light. I am Malala, I stand tall. You can't erase me, I've heard it all. They can't kill the flame. I am Malala, remember my name.
Leaving the valley. Leaving the valley was harder than anything I had done before. I remembered the tuppa my grandmother used to recite. No Pashtun leaves his land of his own sweet will. Either he leaves from poverty, or he leaves for love. Now we were being driven out for a third reason the Tapa writer had never imagined, the Taliban. Leaving our home felt like having my heart ripped out. I stood on our roof, looking at the mountains, the snow-topped Mount Elam, where Alexander the Great had reached up and touched Jupiter. I looked at the trees all coming into leaf. The fruit of our apricot tree might be eaten by someone else this year. Everything was silent, pin-drop silent. There was no sound from the river or the wind. Even the birds were not chirping. I wanted to cry because I felt in my heart I might never see my home again. The documentary makers had asked me how I would feel if one day I left Swat and never came back. At the time, I had thought it was a stupid question, but now I saw that everything I could not imagine happening had happened. I thought my school would not close, and it had. I thought we would never leave Swat, and we were just about to. I thought Swat would be free of the Taliban one day, and we would rejoice, but now I realized that might not happen. I started to cry. It was as if everyone had been waiting for someone else to start. My cousin's wife, Honey, started weeping, then all of us were crying. But my mother was very composed and courageous. I put all my books and notebooks in my school bag, then packed another bag of clothes. I couldn't think straight. I took the trousers from one set and the top from another, so I had a bag of things which didn't match. I didn't take any of my school awards or photos, or personal belongings, as we were traveling in someone else's car, and there was little room. We didn't own anything expensive like a laptop or jewelry. Our only valuable items had been our TV, a fridge, and a washing machine. We didn't lead a life of luxury. We Pashtuns prefer to sit on floors rather than chairs. Our house has holes in the walls, and every plate and cup is cracked. My father had resisted leaving till the end, but then some of my parents' friends had lost a relative in gunfire, so they went to the house to offer prayers of condolences, even though nobody was really venturing out. Seeing their grief made my mother determined to leave. She told my father, "You don't have to come, but I am going and I will take the children to Shangla." She knew he couldn't let her go alone. My mother had had enough of the gunfire and tension. and called Dr. Afzal and begged him to persuade my father to leave. He and his family were going, so they offered us a lift. We didn't have a car, so we were lucky that our neighbors, Safina and her family, were also leaving and could fit some of us in their car while the rest would go with Dr. Afzal. On May 5, 2009 we became IDPs, internally displaced persons. It sounded like a disease. There were a lot of us, not just us 5 but also my grandmother, my cousin, his wife Honey, and their baby. My brothers also wanted to take their pet chickens. Mine had died because I washed it in cold water on a winter's day. It wouldn't revive even when I put it in a shoebox in the house to keep it warm, and got everyone in the neighborhood to pray for it. My mother refused to let the chickens come. What if they make a mess in the car, she asked. Atal suggested we buy them nappies. In the end we left them with a lot of water and corn. She also said I must leave my school bag because there was so little room. I was horrified. I went and whispered Quranic verses over the books to try and protect them. Finally everyone was ready. My mother, father, grandmother, my cousin's wife and baby, and my brothers all squashed into the back of Dr. Afzal's van, along with his wife and children. There were children in the laps of adults and smaller children in their laps. I was luckier. There were fewer people in Safina's car, but I was devastated by the loss of my school bag. Because I had packed my books separately, I had had to leave them all behind. We all said surahs from the Quran and a special prayer to protect our sweet homes and school. Then Safina's father put his foot on the pedal, and away we drove out of the small world of our street, home and school, and into the unknown. We did not know if we would ever see our town again. We had seen pictures of how the army had flattened everything in an operation against militants in Bajar, and we thought everything we knew would be destroyed. The streets were jam-packed. I had never seen them so busy before. There were cars everywhere, as well as rickshaws, mule carts and trucks laden with people and their belongings. There were even motorbikes with entire families balanced on them. Thousands of people were leaving with just the clothes they had on their backs. It felt as if the whole valley was on the move. Some people believe that the Pashtuns descend from one of the lost tribes of Israel, and my father said, "It is as though we are the Israelites leaving Egypt, but we have no Moses to guide us." Few people knew where they were going, they just knew they had to leave. This was the biggest exodus in Pashtun history. Usually there are many ways out of Mingora, but the Taliban had cut down several huge apple trees and used them to block some routes, so everyone was squashed onto the same road. We were an ocean of people. The Taliban patrolled the roads with guns and watched us from the tops of buildings. They were keeping the cars in lines but with weapons, not whistles. "Traffic Taliban," we joked to try and keep our spirits up. At regular intervals along the road we passed army and Taliban checkpoints side by side. Once again the army was seemingly unaware of the Taliban's presence. "Maybe they have poor eyesight," we laughed, "and can't see them." The road was heaving with traffic. It was a long, slow journey and we were all very sweaty, crammed in together. Usually car journeys are an adventure for us children as we rarely go anywhere. But this was different. Everyone was depressed. Inside Dr. Afzal's van, my father was talking to the media, giving a running commentary on the exodus from the valley. My mother kept telling him to keep his voice down for fear the Taliban would hear him. My father's voice is so loud, my mother often jokes that he doesn't need to make phone calls, he can just shout. Finally we got through the mountain pass at Malakand and left Swat behind. It was late afternoon by the time we reached Mardan, which is a hot and busy city. My father kept insisting to everyone, "In a few days we will return, everything will be fine." But we knew that was not true. In Mardan there were already big camps of white UNHCR tents like those for Afghan refugees in Peshawar. We weren't going to stay in the camps because it was the worst idea ever. Almost 2 million of us were fleeing Swat, and you couldn't have fitted 2 million people in those camps. Even if there was a tent for us, it was far too hot inside, and there was talk that diseases like cholera were spreading. My father said he had heard rumors that some Taliban were even hiding inside the camps and harassing the women. Those who could stayed in the homes of local people or with family and friends. Amazingly, 3/4 of all the IDPs were put up by the people of Mardan and the nearby town of Swabi. They opened the doors of their homes, schools, and mosques to the refugees. In our culture, women are expected not to mix with men they are not related to. In order to protect women's purdah, men in families hosting the refugees even slept away from their own homes. They became voluntary IDPs. It was an astonishing example of Pashtun hospitality. We were convinced that if the exodus had been managed by the government, many more would have died of hunger and illness. As we had no relatives in Mardan, We were planning to make our way to Shangla, our family village. So far we had driven in the opposite direction, but we had had to take the only lift we could get out of Swat. We spent that first night in the home of Dr. Afzal. My father then left us to go to Peshawar and alert people to what was happening. He promised to meet us later in Shangla. My mother tried very hard to persuade him to come with us, but he refused. He wanted the people of Peshawar and Islamabad to be aware of the terrible conditions in which IDPs were living and that the military were doing nothing. We said goodbye and were terribly worried we wouldn't see him again. The next day we got a lift to Abbottabad, where my grandmother's family lived. There we met up with my cousin Kanji, who was heading north like us. He ran a boys' hostel in Swat and was taking 7 or 8 boys to Kohistan by coach. He was going to Besham, from where we would need another lift to take us to Shangla. It was nightfall by the time we reached Besham as many roads were blocked. We spent the night in a cheap, dirty hotel while my cousin tried to arrange a van to take us to Shangla. A man came near my mother, and she took her shoe off, and hit him once, then twice, and he ran away. She had hit him so hard that when she looked at the shoe it was broken. I always knew my mother was a strong woman, but I looked at her with new respect. It was not easy to get from Besham to our village, and we had to walk 25 kilometers carrying all our things. At one point we were stopped by the army, who told us we could go no further and must turn back. Our home is in Shangla, where will we go, we begged. My grandmother started crying and saying her life had never been so bad. Finally they let us through. The army and their machine guns were everywhere. Because of the curfew and the checkpoints there was not one other vehicle on the road that didn't belong to the military. We were afraid that the army wouldn't know who we were and would shoot us. When we reached the village, our family was astonished to see us. Everyone believed the Taliban would return to Shangla, so they couldn't understand why we hadn't remained in Mardan. We stayed in my mother's village, Kashat, with my uncle Faiz Muhammad and his family. We had to borrow clothes from our relatives as we hadn't brought much. I was happy to be with my cousin Sumbul, who is a year older than me. Once we were settled, I started going to school with her. I was in year 6, but started in year 7 to be with Sumbul. There were only 3 girls in that year, as most of the village girls of that age do not go to school, so we were taught with boys, as they didn't have enough room or staff to teach just 3 girls separately. I was different to the other girls as I didn't cover my face, and I used to talk to every teacher and ask questions, but I tried to be obedient and polite, always saying, "Yes, sir." It took over half an hour to walk to school, and because I am bad at getting up in the morning, the second day we were late. I was shocked when the teacher hit my hand with a stick to punish me, but then decided that at least it meant they were accepting me and not treating me differently. My uncle even gave me pocket money to buy snacks at school. They sold cucumber and watermelon, not sweets and crisps like in Mingora. One day at school there was a Parents' Day and prize-giving ceremony, and all the boys were encouraged to make speeches. Some of the girls also took part, but not in public. Instead, we spoke into a microphone in our classrooms, and our voices were then projected into the main hall. But I was used to speaking in public, so I came out, and in front of all the boys I recited one naat, a poem in which I praised the Prophet. Then I asked the teacher if I could read some more poetry. I read a poem about working hard to achieve your heart's desires. A diamond must be cut many times before it yields even a tiny jewel, I said. After that I spoke of my namesake, Malala of my wand, who had strength and power equal to hundreds and thousands of brave men, because her few lines of poetry changed everything so the British were defeated. People in the audience seemed surprised, and I wondered whether they thought I was showing off, or whether they were asking themselves why I wasn't wearing a veil. It was nice being with my cousins, but I missed my books. I kept thinking of my school bag at home with copies of Oliver Twist, and Romeo and Juliet waiting to be read, and the Ugly Betty DVDs on the shelf. But now we were living our own drama. We had been so happy, then something very bad had come into our lives, and we were now waiting for our happy ending. When I complained about my books, my brothers whined about their chickens. We'd heard on the radio that the army had started the battle for Mingora. They had parachuted in soldiers, and there had been hand-to-hand fighting in the streets. The Taliban were using hotels and government buildings as bunkers. After 4 days, the military took 3 squares including Green Chowk, where the Taliban used to display the beheaded bodies of their victims. Then they captured the airport, and in a week they had taken back the city. We continued to worry about my father. In Shangla it was hard to find a mobile phone signal. We had to climb onto a huge boulder in a field, And even then we rarely had more than one bar of reception, so we hardly ever spoke to him. But after we had been in Shangla for about 6 weeks, my father said we could travel to Peshawar, where he had been staying in one room with 3 friends. It was very emotional to see him again. Then, a complete family once more, we travelled down to Islamabad, where we stayed with the family of Shiza, the lady who had called us from Stanford. While we were there we heard that Ambassador Richard Holbrooke, the American envoy to Pakistan and Afghanistan, was holding a meeting in the Serena Hotel about the conflict, and my father and I managed to get inside. We almost missed it as I hadn't set the alarm properly, so my father was barely speaking to me. Holbrooke was a big gruff man with a red face, but people said he had helped bring peace to Bosnia. I sat next to him, and he asked me how old I was. "I'm 12, I replied, trying to look as tall as possible. "Respected Ambassador, I request you, please help us girls to get an education," I said. He laughed. "You already have lots of problems and we are doing lots for you," he replied. "We have pledged billions of dollars in economic aid. We are working with your government on providing electricity, gas, but your country faces a lot of problems." I did an interview with a radio station called Power 99. They liked it very much and told us they had a guest house in Abbottabad where we could all go. We stayed there for a week, and to my joy I heard Moniba was also in Abbottabad, as was one of our teachers and another friend. Moniba and I had not spoken since our fight on the last day before becoming IDPs. We arranged to meet in a park, and I brought her Pepsi and biscuits. "It was all your fault," she told me. I agreed. I didn't mind, I just wanted to be friends. Our week at the guest house soon ended, and we went to Haripur, where one of my aunts lived. It was our 4th city in 2 months. I knew we were better off than those who lived in the camps, queuing for food and water for hours under the hot sun, but I missed my valley. It was there I spent my 12th birthday. Nobody remembered. Even my father forgot, he was so busy hopping about. I was upset and recalled how different my 11th birthday had been. I had shared a cake with my friends. There were balloons and I had made the same wish I was making on my 12th birthday, but this time there was no cake and there were no candles to blow out. Once again I wished for peace in our valley.